Jordan Reeves was 34 years old when he walked out of Haverford Correctional with $83, a cracked watch, and 3 years of silence where his life used to be. He had been a meticulous accountant at a respected Charlotte firm, the kind of man who documented everything twice, trusted completely, and never once imagined that the woman he married would spend 2 years memorizing his passwords, copying his professional seal, and routing $340,000 through accounts registered in his name. He took the plea deal to avoid 8 years. He told himself Camille was just a woman who couldn't survive the weight of his situation. He was wrong about nearly everything. The morning after his release, sitting at his Aunt Dolores's kitchen table, he learned that 6 months after his sentencing, Camille had filed for divorce, and 14 months after that, she had married someone else, a wealthy developer, a private ceremony in Asheville. Dolores slid the newspaper clipping across the table without a word. Jordan looked at the photograph, his wife, radiant in white, another man's hand at her back, and set it face down. What Jordan Reeves did next, no one saw coming. Least of all, Camille. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The desk lamp threw a warm circle of light across the papers. Outside, Charlotte was quiet. The kind of Sunday night quiet that settles in before a week begins. No traffic, no voices, just the low hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the occasional tick of the baseboard, heat kicking on. Jordan Reeves liked this hour. He sat with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a fresh cup of coffee at his elbow, going through the month's personal financial records the way he always did. Slowly, column by column, every line given its proper attention. Not because anything was wrong, because this was simply what he did. The habit was so deep it didn't feel like discipline, it felt like breathing. He was 34 years old. He had worked at Hartwell & Associates for 6 years. He had built his career the slow way. No family connections, no shortcuts, just the kind of careful, documented work that made partners look good and kept clients' money exactly where it was supposed to be. His desk at the office was the most organized in the building. His files were cross-referenced. His personal ledger, a thick, cloth-covered notebook he had kept since his first day on the job, recorded every login, every transaction note, every client interaction with the date, time, and brief notation of what was done and why. His supervisor once joked that Jordan Reeves would document a coffee break if he thought it was billable. Jordan had smiled politely and said nothing. He didn't think it was a joke. From down the hall came the soft sound of Camille moving around the kitchen, a cabinet closing, the quiet rush of water from the tap. He recognized the rhythm of her without having to look. 3 years married. They had met at Hartwell. Her in client relations, warm and precise in the way people are when they understand that warmth is a skill worth developing. She lit up rooms, not in a loud way, in a way that made people feel like the room had been a little dim before she arrived. Jordan had noticed her for months before he said anything, which was entirely consistent with who he was. He didn't move until he was sure. She had said yes to dinner. She had laughed at exactly the right moments. 8 months later, he proposed at her mother's kitchen table in Gastonia because he had paid enough attention to understand that was the only place she would have wanted it to happen. Camille appeared in the doorway of the office. She was in a gray sweater, and her reading glasses were pushed up on her head the same way his were, which made him smile. "You're still at that?" she said. "Almost done." She leaned against the doorframe, one arm crossed over her chest, holding her wine glass loosely by the stem. Her eyes moved across his desk, the stacked folders, the open ledger, the laptop screen, with that casual, familiar scan she always did. She knew this room the way you know a place you've spent real time in. His passwords were no secret to her. She had used his laptop more than once when hers was charging, always asking, always returning it exactly as she found it. "Don't stay up too late," she said. "I won't." She pushed off the door frame, and her footsteps moved back down the hall toward the living room. Jordan watched the empty doorway for a moment. Then he looked back at his papers. He noticed, without particularly noting it, that the small stack of mail on the corner of his desk had been shifted. Not by much. An inch, maybe two. He had a precise memory for where things sat. He looked at it for one breath, then looked away. Camille sometimes sorted the mail. It wasn't unusual. He returned to the column he'd been working through. At 9:14 p.m., his laptop chimed. The email was from Hartwell's internal audit department. The sender was the firm's compliance director. The subject line read, "Urgent Credential Activity Review. Please respond tonight." Jordan set down his coffee. He read it once, then again, then a third time, each pass slower than the last. 6 client trust accounts. Discrepancies identified during a quarterly audit cycle. Combined irregular transfers totaling $340,000. All transactions traced to a single set of access credentials. His credentials, his username, his employee ID number, his professional seal, referenced in attached documentation. The compliance director's message was careful and professional, and did not use the word theft. But it didn't have to. Jordan sat very still for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Down the hall, the television came on low. He opened his personal ledger. He found the first flagged date, a Wednesday in March. He ran his finger down the page until he found that Wednesday. He had logged in at 8:51 a.m. He had logged out at 6:07 p.m. The notes column listed 4 client files, 2 internal reports, and a lunch break from 12:30 to 1:15. According to the audit email, a transfer had been executed at 2:43 p.m. that afternoon, on an account he had no business touching. He had been in a staff meeting at 2:43 p.m. He had written that down too. He turned to the next flagged date. Then the next. Each one was wrong. Not close. Not ambiguous. Wrong. Jordan took off his reading glasses. He set them on the desk. He looked at the email, then at the ledger, then back at the email. Something was deeply wrong. The parking lot was nearly empty when Jordan pulled in at 7:22 a.m. He had not slept. He had sat at his desk until almost midnight, going through every flagged date in the audit email, cross-referencing against his ledger, finding the same thing each time. A wrong answer where a right answer should have been. He had eventually gone to bed, lain flat on his back in the dark, and stared at the ceiling while Camille breathed steadily beside him. He had not woken her. He told himself he was being considerate. The truth was, he didn't know how to start the conversation yet. He needed to see the firm's actual records first. He crossed the parking lot toward the main entrance and held his keycard up to the reader by the door. The light flashed red. He tried it again. Red. He stood there for a moment with the card in his hand, looking at it. It was the same card he had used every workday for 6 years. His photo, his name, his employee number printed across the front in clean black type. He pulled out his phone and called the building's main line. It was early enough that it went to the overnight desk. "This is Jordan Reeves," he said. "Staff accountant, 6th floor. My keycard isn't reading. Can someone let me in?" There was a brief pause. Then, "Mr. Reeves, I have a note here that your access has been placed on administrative hold. Someone from HR will be reaching out this morning." He thanked the man and hung up. He stood at the glass door and could see straight through to the elevator bank, to the potted plant in the lobby corner that needed watering, to the security desk where a guard was watching him with the careful, blank expression of someone who had been told what to do and intended to do it. Jordan put his keycard back in his pocket. He folded his hands. He waited. They let him in at 7:45 when a man he did not recognize came to escort him, not to his own office, but to the 3rd-floor conference room. The one with the long oval table and the frosted glass panels that made everything inside look like a shadow. There were 4 people waiting. 2 he recognized. Gerald Park, the firm's managing partner. A compact, careful man who chose every word like he was paying for it. And Brenda Holloway, senior partner, who had been at Hartwell for over 20 years and whose opinion carried more weight in that building than almost anyone else's. She was the one who had signed off on Jordan's last performance review. Exceptional attention to detail. A model of professional documentation practice. Her words. The other 2 were investigators from an outside firm. One of them had a printed binder on the table in front of him that was 2 inches thick. "Jordan," Gerald said, "please sit down." Jordan sat. He placed his hands flat on the table. What followed was 40 minutes of precise, methodical presentation. The investigators walked through each flagrant transaction with the calm efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Every entry was tagged with his login credentials, his username, his employee ID. Several documents bore his professional seal, the small embossed stamp he kept in his home office desk drawer. 3 of them carried what appeared to be his signature. And then came the detail that landed like something dropped from a height. A secondary account, opened at a separate financial institution, registered under his Social Security number. The account had received routed funds from 4 of the 6 compromised client accounts. It had been opened 22 months ago. "I've never seen that account," Jordan said. "I didn't open it." The investigator looked at him with the practiced neutrality of someone who had been told that before. "The account was opened with a copy of your Social Security card and a state-issued ID bearing your name and number. Then someone used my information. The ID presented was consistent with your driver's license format and issue date." Jordan turned to Brenda. She was looking at the binder. She had been looking at the binder since he sat down. Not once had she lifted her eyes to his face. He opened the leather portfolio he had brought from home and laid his personal ledger on the table. "I keep a daily log," he said. "Every login, time-stamped, every session. The dates in your documentation do not match my recorded activity. Several of these transactions occurred during windows when I was in meetings, or logged out of the system entirely. It's all here." Gerald looked at the ledger, then at the investigators, then back at Jordan. "Jordan," he said carefully, "a self-kept log isn't something we can weigh against an audit trail. It corroborates. It's your own document," the investigator said. Not unkindly, just finally. Jordan closed the ledger. He kept his hands still. He was suspended effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. He was asked to surrender his firm-issued materials and to avoid contact with clients. The meeting ended in 11 minutes after that. Gerald walked out first. The investigators followed. Brenda stood last. She gathered her copy of the binder, tucked it under her arm, and finally, for just a moment, looked at him. She looked away before he could read her face. Then she walked out and pulled the door shut behind her. He made the call from the parking lot, sitting in the driver's seat with the engine off. Camille answered on the second ring. He told her everything. The meeting, the secondary account, the seal, the signature, the ledger being dismissed. He kept his voice level and factual. He laid it out the same way he would lay out a discrepancy report. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Did they say what happens next?" "They said, pending investigation." "Did they mention the police?" Jordan paused. It was a reasonable question. It was also the first one she had asked. Not, "Are you all right?" Not, "Jordan, this is insane." The first thing she reached for was the police. "Not directly," he said. "Okay." Another pause. He could hear her thinking, not panicking, thinking. "Just come home. We'll figure this out." Her voice was warm. It was the right voice. It had all the right sounds in it. He filed it away without knowing why. He started the engine and pulled out of the lot. There were 2 cars parked in front of their building that he didn't recognize. He noticed them before he noticed the men. 2 of them standing on the front steps, one holding a folded document. They watched his car pull into the space with the specific kind of patience that is not patience at all, but certainty. Jordan turned off the engine. He sat for one breath. Then he got out. The warrant was for his arrest. 2 counts of felony embezzlement. The investigator read it clearly and without theatrics, and Jordan listened to every word and did not interrupt. He was handcuffed with his hands in front of him, which he registered as a small courtesy. As they walked him toward the patrol car, he looked up at the building. 3rd floor. Their unit. Camille was standing in the window. She had her arms folded across her chest, her shoulder against the glass, watching. He looked at her. She did not move toward the window. She did not press her hand to the glass or mouth his name or lift her phone to call anyone. She simply stood there and watched with an expression he could not quite read from this distance. The door of the patrol car opened. Jordan ducked his head and got in. When the car pulled away, he did not look back at the window again. The plea deal came through on a Thursday. His public defender, a tired man named Garrett who carried 4 too many cases and never quite had enough coffee, laid it on the table between them in a visiting room that smelled like bleach and old carpet. 2 counts of felony embezzlement, 3 years, no trial. The alternative was trial, where the evidence, clean, complete, pointing nowhere but at Jordan, would be presented to 12 strangers. And Garrett, who was not a bad man but was an honest one, told him quietly that the likely outcome of that trial was 8 years. Jordan signed. He entered Haverford Correctional in March of 2020. The processing took 4 hours. They gave him a uniform the color of old concrete, a mattress wrapped in plastic, and a bar of soap still in its paper sleeve. The cell block smelled like industrial cleaner, and something underneath it that the cleaner never quite reached. The fluorescent light above his bunk hummed at a frequency that he noticed for the first 3 nights, and then stopped hearing. The way you stop hearing traffic when you live near a highway. He made himself useful immediately. He kept his bunk tight, his area clean, his face neutral. He spoke when spoken to, and did not speak when it wasn't necessary. He was not soft, and he did not pretend to be hard. He found the middle space that men find when they understand that survival in a closed system is mostly about reading the room correctly and never giving anyone a reason to look at you twice. Camille sent 2 letters. The first arrived 6 weeks after he was processed. It was 2 pages, handwritten, and every sentence in it was about her. Her pain, her confusion, the way people looked at her now, the difficulty of explaining things to her mother. Jordan read it twice and looked for the part where she said, "I know you didn't do this. It wasn't there." He put the letter in his locker. The second letter came 10 weeks later, shorter, more final in its rhythm, the way a door sounds different when someone closes it with the intention of locking it. She hoped he was taking care of himself. She needed to focus on her own healing. Her own healing. He did not write back. His calls went to voicemail, then to a full voicemail box, then to a disconnected tone that he heard 3 times before he stopped dialing. A cousin named Marcus reached through a mutual friend, relayed only that Camille had moved out of the apartment. He said it carefully, the way people say things when they know more than they're telling. Jordan thanked him and didn't push. In year 2, he stopped, not out of surrender, out of calculation. He turned the energy inward the way you redirect water when the original channel is blocked. You find where it can flow, and you let it move. He requested access to the facility library and read everything they had on financial law, on audit methodology, on forensic accounting procedure. He filed 2 requests to review documents from his own case through his legal paperwork access. 1 was denied. 1 produced 3 pages he had already memorized. He had memorized quite a lot by then. every transaction date from the prosecution's audit report, every timestamp, every account number. He ran them against his own remembered ledger entries the way you run a column of figures, carefully, completely, checking for where the math breaks down. And it did break down. In 17 places, 17 windows where the flagged activity and his own documented presence in the world did not match. Small gaps, the kind that an overextended public defender and a prosecution with clean evidence had no reason to examine closely. He held those 17 numbers like stones in his pocket. He did not know yet what he would do with them. He knew they were real. Victor Osei arrived in year 2. Nigerian-American, former financial analyst, convicted on a single count of wire fraud for a scheme he had partly designed and mostly regretted. He was sharp and quiet and kept to himself, which meant Jordan noticed him immediately. The shakedown started in Victor's 3rd month. There was a man named Deeks who ran a debt trap inside the block. Small favors extended to new inmates that became obligations that became leverage. Jordan had seen the mechanism from the outside and understood its architecture completely. He spent 9 days gathering what he needed. He identified the right corrections officer, not the most senior, but the most discreet, and the one with the most to gain from a clean block report. He got the specifics to that officer through a channel that left no visible trace back to himself or Victor. The scheme collapsed in a week. Deeks was transferred. Victor found Jordan at the library table 2 days later. He sat down across from him and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "That was you." Jordan looked up from his page. "Don't know what you're talking about." Victor studied him. Then he nodded, once, slowly, and picked up a book. They didn't discuss it again. They played chess on Tuesday evenings and talked about financial law and said nothing about the block. That was enough. Victor's release came 18 months before Jordan's. He stood in the doorway of the block on his last morning, already in civilian clothes, a dark blue shirt, clean jeans, and turned back once. He looked at Jordan directly. "Whatever you need," he said. "Whenever. I don't forget." March 2023. Jordan Reeves walked out of Haverford Correctional at 6:47 in the morning on a Tuesday. He had $83 in gate money, a watch with a cracked crystal, and a manila envelope containing his identification documents, his discharge paperwork, and one folded piece of paper with an address on it. Dolores's address, the same one she had lived at for 19 years. He had held it in his mind for 1,397 days, like a compass bearing, the one fixed point he had oriented everything else toward. He stood at the curb outside the facility's main gate and breathed the outside air, which was cold and smelled like wet leaves and car exhaust and something underneath it all that was simply open space. He stood still in it for a moment. Then he walked to the bus stop. He checked the schedule posted on the panel. It had been revised since he last took this line. He filed this away. He boarded the next bus when it came. He sat by the window and watched Charlotte move past him as the city woke up. And he held the envelope in his lap with both hands, and he did not let himself think yet about everything that waited on the other side of the address on that folded piece of paper. Not yet. First, Dolores. First, food. First, his feet under him. Then he would begin. Dolores lived on the 3rd floor of a brick building on Caldwell Street that had been standing since 1971 and looked like it intended to keep standing for another 50 years. The hallway smelled like pine sol and someone's dinner, onions and something savory, and the carpet runner that led to her door was the same burgundy pattern Jordan remembered from childhood, worn thin in the center by decades of foot traffic. He knocked. She opened the door in under 10 seconds. She was 62 years old, small-framed, with silver hair she kept pinned back and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at him the way you look at something you have been waiting a long time to see, fully, completely, taking inventory. She didn't say anything. She reached out, wrapped one hand around his arm, and pulled him inside. The apartment was warm. The kitchen light was on, and the table was set. 2 plates, cloth napkins, a pot on the stove with a lid still on it. She had made smothered chicken with rice and green beans cooked soft, the way he had always liked them. She put a plate in front of him and sat down across from him, and poured 2 glasses of sweet tea, and asked him exactly nothing. He ate. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the first bite. He ate steadily and without embarrassment, and Dolores watched him with both hands around her glass, and the quiet patience of a woman who understood that some things needed to happen before other things could. She asked him about the bus ride. He told her the schedule had changed. She asked if the weather had turned cold yet this morning. He said yes. They talked about her neighbor, Mrs. Pratt, who had gotten a new dog that barked too early. They talked about the pastor at her church, who had retired in January. Normal things, ground-level things, the kind of conversation that puts a man's feet back under him. When his plate was empty, she refilled his tea without asking. Then she folded her hands on the table and looked at him steadily. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And before I do, I need you to hear me say that I made a choice not to tell you while you were inside. I want you to know I didn't make that choice lightly. I made it because I knew what it would do to you in there, and I wasn't willing to do that to you." Jordan set down his glass. "Tell me. Camille filed for divorce 6 months after your sentencing." The kitchen was very quiet. "She cited abandonment." Dolores said it plainly, without softening it. "You didn't have the resources to contest from inside, and there wasn't anyone with the standing to do it for you. It finalized in 8 months. Jordan's hands were flat on the table. He didn't move them. "That's not all," Dolores said. She got up, went to the counter, and opened the drawer where she kept papers. She came back with a folded clipping, newsprint, glossy magazine stock, and set it in front of him without ceremony. He unfolded it. It was a society column from a Charlotte lifestyle publication. 14 months after the divorce finalized, the caption read, "An Asheville ceremony. Private." Camille stood in a white dress with her chin tipped slightly up, laughing at something off to the left of the camera, and she looked the way she had always looked when she was at her most confident, like the room existed specifically to frame her. The man beside her was tall, silver at the temples, with the easy posture of someone who had never once worried about money. His hand rested at the small of her back. He was looking at her. The caption named them Philip and Camille Ashworth. Jordan looked at the photograph for a long time, long enough that Dolores didn't move or speak. Then he folded it in half, face down, and set it on the table beside his plate. He said, "What else?" Dolores took a breath. "My cousin Yvette still does administrative work at Hartwell. She's been there 20 years. She notices things." She paused. "1 week after your sentencing, Camille left the firm. She wasn't fired. She wasn't investigated. She left with a severance package that Yvette said was more than it had any business being for someone with her tenure. The partners handled her exit quietly and fast. Nobody asked questions. Nobody gave any explanations. Jordan absorbed this. He sat with it the way he sat with numbers, not rushing toward a conclusion, letting the shape of it form on its own. "They knew," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yvette thinks at least one of them knew something." He nodded once, slow, precise. "The box," he said. "Do you still have the box?" Dolores was already standing. She brought it from the hall closet, a banker's box with a fitted lid, his name written on the side in her handwriting. She set it on the table in front of him. He removed the lid. Inside, exactly where they had always been, were his professional files, his correspondence, his tax records, and his personal work ledger. The navy blue notebook where, for 6 years, he had logged every login, every client note, every timestamp, by habit and by instinct. He opened it to the first flagged date from the prosecution's timeline. He began to read. Officer Reyes worked out of a beige government office building on East Trade Street, where the waiting room chairs were plastic and the fluorescent lights buzzed just loud enough to notice. She was in her mid-40s, with short natural hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She reviewed Jordan's paperwork with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times and intended to do it thousands more. She did not treat him like a criminal. She did not treat him like a person exactly. She treated him like a case file that happened to be sitting in the chair across from her desk, which was the most professional thing she could have done. Monthly check-ins the first 6 months, she said, without looking up. Employment verification within 60 days. No travel outside Mecklenburg County without prior written approval. No contact with any named party from your original case. Understood, Jordan said. She looked up then. She studied his face for a moment, not unkindly, but with the particular attention of someone trained to read the space between what people say and what they mean. You have a plan for employment? She asked. Working on it, he said. She wrote something down. 60 days, she said again. Then she stamped the form, slid a copy across the desk, and stood. Appointment over. The credit union was 4 blocks from Dolores's apartment, a small branch with a woman at the front desk who smiled at him and called him Mr. Reeves, and did not ask him a single question that wasn't on the form. He opened a checking account with $60 of his $83. The account existed in his name only. He folded the deposit slip and put it in his inside jacket pocket. Then he sat on a bench outside and called Victor Osei. Victor picked up before the second ring. "You're out," Victor said. Not a question. "Yesterday morning," Jordan said. A brief pause. Then, "Tell me what you need." Jordan watched a city bus roll through the intersection. He had already organized what he was going to say. He did not need to organize it again. "I need 2 things," he said. "First, pull everything you can find in public records on a man named Philip Ashworth. He runs a real estate development company called Ashworth Group here in Charlotte. Property filings, business registrations, any municipal contracts in progress or pending, financing documents if they're public, partner names." "Got it," Victor said. "Second, I need to know if the name Camille Ashworth appears on any of those filings. Co-signatory, named party, anything." Victor said nothing for a moment. Then, 5 days, 5 days, Jordan agreed. He hung up. He put the phone in his pocket and sat still on the bench for a moment, watching the street. Then he stood and walked back to Dolores's apartment. The next 5 days had a shape to them. Jordan was up before 6 each morning. Dolores made coffee and left him to it. The kitchen table became his workspace, the ledger open on the left, a yellow legal pad on the right, and his memory filling in the gaps between. He worked backward through the prosecution's timeline, transaction by transaction. The fraud had run for 22 months, 41 individual transactions across 6 client accounts, totaling $340,000. Every single one had been executed using his login credentials, but his ledger told a different story, 1 line at a time. He had kept the ledger the way a carpenter keeps a level, not because he expected to need it, but because doing the work right meant documenting it. Every workday, he had logged the time he opened the firm's system, the clients he accessed, the time he logged out. He had done it for 6 years without ever thinking it would matter. Now it was the most important thing he owned. He found the first discrepancy on day 2. A transaction executed at 11:14 a.m. on a Thursday in November 2018. His ledger showed him logged out of the system at 10:47 that morning. He'd had a dentist appointment, noted in his own handwriting in the right margin, the name of the office and everything. He remembered the appointment. He remembered the waiting room. He remembered the drive back. He circled the entry in red. By day 4, he had 19 circles. 19 transactions executed during windows when his own records showed him either logged out of the office, or, on 3 occasions, not even in the city. The timestamps didn't lie. His credentials had been used, yes, but the pattern of use did not match any pattern of his working life. It matched something else, someone else's schedule, someone who knew when he would be away from his desk, someone who knew his calendar. He set down the pen. He picked it up again. On a clean page of the legal pad, he wrote 2 words at the top. Brenda Holloway. He sat with that name for a long time. He could still see her at that conference room table. Senior partner, 20-plus years at the firm. The woman who had built her reputation on knowing exactly what happened inside Hartwell's walls. And she had sat there and looked at everything except him. Her eyes had moved to the documents, to the investigators, to the window, to her hands, anywhere but his face. A woman who knew nothing would have looked at him. He underlined the name once. Then he set the pen down and went to bed. On the morning of day 5, his phone rang at 8:17 a.m. "I've got what you asked for," Victor said. "All of it?" "All of it." Jordan looked at the legal pad, at the 19 red circles, at the name at the top of the clean page. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "You picked the place. There's a diner off I-85, Victor said. "Exit 41. I'll text you the address." The diner off I-85 was the kind of place that had been the same for 30 years, and intended to stay that way. Vinyl booths the color of old mustard, a laminated menu with coffee rings on the corners, a ceiling fan that turned slowly enough to be decorative rather than useful. It smelled like bacon grease and dish soap, and something sweet from the pie case near the register. Jordan got there first. He took a booth in the back corner where he could see the door. Old habit. Another prison reflex he hadn't shaken yet. Victor walked in 6 minutes later. He was taller than Jordan remembered, or maybe it was the way he carried himself now. Straight-backed, measured, the particular posture of a man who had rebuilt something and knew what it had cost him. He wore a clean gray jacket over a dark shirt. He carried a manila folder under one arm. He spotted Jordan immediately and crossed the diner without looking at anything else. They shook hands. No embrace. That wasn't what they were. "You look like yourself," Victor said, settling into the booth across from him. "That bad?" Jordan said. Victor almost smiled. "That good." A waitress came. They both ordered coffee. Victor set the folder on the table between them, but did not open it yet. He wrapped both hands around his mug and looked at Jordan directly. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm working," Jordan said. Victor nodded. That was the right answer, and they both knew it. He opened the folder. "Philip Ashworth," Victor said, sliding the first page across the table. 47 years old. 3rd-generation Charlotte family. His grandfather started in residential. His father expanded into commercial. Philip took over about 15 years ago and pushed the company into mixed-use development and municipal contracting. Jordan looked at the page. Property listings, a business registration summary, a photograph from the Ashworth Group website. Philip in front of a completed building. The look of a man who was comfortable being photographed. "On paper, he looks solid," Victor continued. 4 active development projects. A commercial portfolio with 8 properties. But, he tapped the page, he is leveraged, heavily. 3 of those 4 projects are financed through investor capital, not retained earnings. The 4th is backed by credit lines secured against his primary residence, and 2 commercial properties he owns outright. Jordan absorbed this without expression. "His reputation is doing most of the work," Victor said. "The investors are in because they trust the Ashworth name. The lenders are comfortable because the portfolio looks established. But if something disrupts the trust picture, the structure gets fragile fast." He slid the second page across. "This is the piece that matters most. Ashworth Group has a municipal affordable housing contract in the approval and compliance stage. $4.2 million. City-backed financing, federal funding components, It's his biggest active deal, and it's the one that opens the door to the next tier of municipal work he's been positioning for. Jordan looked at the contract filing summary. He read it slowly. Then he read it again. Camille's name, he said. Right here. Victor pointed to a line near the bottom of the page. Co-signatory on 3 of the business financing applications. And she's a named party on the preliminary filing paperwork for the municipal contract. Jordan set the page down carefully. Camille Ashworth. Her name, her new name, the name she had purchased with 3 years of his life, was attached in writing to Philip's most important deal. Her background was no longer something she could keep at a comfortable distance. It was material. It was on the filings. It was reviewable. The contract approval process requires a background review of all named parties, Victor said, reading Jordan's expression correctly. Standard for federal-funded projects. I know, Jordan said. Victor let that sit. Then he turned to the 3rd page. There's something else, he said. His voice was the same, calm, unhurried, but something in it shifted slightly. I found a civil lawsuit. One of the original defrauded clients filed against Hartwell and Associates 2 years after your conviction. Jordan looked up. It settled fast, Victor said. Terms were sealed, but the initial filing is public record. He slid the page across. The complaint referenced a total loss figure. Jordan looked at the number printed on the page. $510,000. He went completely still. The prosecution had argued $340,000. He had pled to $340,000. That was the number in the audit report, the number in the court documents, the number everyone used. But he remembered, with the precise photographic clarity of a man who had spent 3 years re-examining every moment, flagging an anomalous sub-account 2 weeks before his arrest. A small routing irregularity on a high-value client file. He had written it up. He had submitted the flag in writing to his direct supervisor. He had never heard back. The difference between 340 and 510 was $170,000. The difference between those two numbers meant there was a second pool of money nobody had accounted for in his prosecution. His voice came out even. Who was my supervisor of record at the time of the flag submission? Victor checked his notes. Though from the way his eyes moved, Jordan suspected he had already reviewed this twice before walking into the diner. He looked up. Jordan already knew the answer before Victor said it. Brenda Holloway. Jordan closed the folder. He placed his hand flat on top of it. He picked up his coffee and took one slow sip and set it back down. The next move was clear. Brenda Holloway's assistant was gone by 12:15. Jordan had watched the building from across the street for 40 minutes, sitting on a bench with a cup of coffee from the cart on the corner, looking like a man with nowhere particular to be. He had timed it twice before today, once on Thursday, once on Friday. The assistant left for lunch between noon and 12:20 every weekday. Brenda stayed at her desk. She ate from a container she brought from home and read documents while she ate. She had done this for years. Some people's habits were as reliable as math. At 12:18, Jordan stood up, dropped the cup in the trash can beside the bench, and crossed the street. The lobby of Hartwell and Associates had new carpet. That was the first thing he noticed. Dark gray, thick, the kind that swallowed sound. Everything else was the same. The frosted glass reception panel, the brass lettering above the elevator bank, the particular quality of air-conditioned silence that expensive professional buildings all shared. Jordan had walked through this lobby 6 years of his life. His badge used to open the side door without stopping. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. Nobody stopped him. He was wearing a clean, dark jacket, and he walked like a man who belonged where he was going. That had always been enough. The 4th floor was quiet at midday. 3 offices down the hallway, second door on the right. He could see through the narrow glass panel beside the door. Brenda, at her desk, head down, a container of food open to her left, a stack of papers in front of her. Jordan opened the door and walked in and closed it behind him. Brenda looked up. For a single second, her face was the face of a woman whose mind had simply stopped processing. Then recognition moved across it, and behind the recognition, something else. Something older and heavier that had clearly been sitting there for a long time. "Jordan," she said. He sat down in the chair across from her desk without being invited. He did not lean back. He did not look around the office. He kept his eyes on her and reached into the folder he was carrying and placed one document on the desk between them, face up, turned so she could read it. It was a copy of the internal flag memo, his name in the header, his submission date, his professional notation marking the anomalous sub-account routing. The supervisor line at the top right corner read, "Holloway, B." Brenda looked at the document. She did not touch it. She looked at it the way you look at something you have tried very hard not to picture for 3 years and are now seeing again in full daylight. The food container sat forgotten to her left. The stack of papers in front of her no longer seemed to exist for her. Jordan let the silence work. Then she said, quietly, "How did you get that?" "I filed it," he said. "It was mine. My aunt kept my files." He paused. "All of them." Brenda closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, she looked older than she had a minute ago. "Jordan, I'm not here for an apology," he said. His voice was level. Not cold, but level. The way a table is level. "I want you to understand what I know, so that you understand what your options are." She pressed her lips together and nodded once. He laid it out. He did it the way he did everything. Methodically, without decoration, moving from fact to fact in the order that built the clearest picture. He told her about the transaction timestamps in his personal ledger that did not align with the prosecution's documented windows. He told her about the civil suit filing, the $510,000 figure, the $170,000 that had never appeared in his prosecution. He told her about Camille's severance, the speed of it, the silence around it, the fact that a woman adjacent to the largest embezzlement case in the firm's history walked out 1 week after sentencing with an undisclosed package, and was never once asked a formal question. He watched Brenda's face as he spoke. She did not interrupt. She did not try to argue. There was no performance of innocence from her. She was too intelligent for that, and they both knew it. "The partners told me the case was resolved," she said when he finished. Her voice was flat, not defensive, just recounting it. "They said the clients were settled, the firm's exposure was managed, and that reintroducing the memo would implicate the firm in negligence without changing the outcome. They said your attorney would find his own path." She looked at the memo. "I told myself the same thing." "He didn't find it," Jordan said. "No," she said. "He didn't." A long moment passed. "I'm not here to take the firm apart," Jordan said. "I'm not interested in destroying you. What I need is your written statement, submitted to the state bar and to the original prosecuting attorney's office. What you received, when you received it, and what you were asked to do with it." Brenda looked at him directly for the first time since he had walked in. There was something in her face he hadn't expected. Not fear. Something closer to relief. The specific, complicated relief of a person who has been carrying something they were never meant to carry alone, and who has just been offered a place to set it down. "How long do I have?" she asked. 1 week, Jordan said. He stood, picked up the folder, and left the copy of the memo on her desk. "You can be part of the correction, or you can be caught inside the collapse." He held her gaze for 1 more second. "That's the whole decision." He walked out. He did not look back. His car was parked 2 blocks down, in a metered spot on a side street shaded by an oak tree that had pushed the sidewalk up slightly with its roots. Jordan unlocked the door, got in, and sat with both hands on the wheel. He did not start the car. The street outside was ordinary and unhurried. A woman walked past with a stroller. A delivery truck idled at the corner. The oak leaves were turning at the edges, that first pale yellow that came before the real color. He thought about the man who had sat at his desk on a Sunday evening in October 2019 and opened an email that changed everything. He thought about how that man had felt, walking into this building the next morning, confused and frightened and certain, with the deep certainty of someone who has never been dishonest, that the truth would be enough to protect him. It wasn't grief, exactly. It was something more specific than that. Something that didn't have a clean name. An ache for that version of himself. The one who believed that working hard and keeping careful records and trusting the right people meant that the ground would hold. He breathed through it. Slow and deliberate. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Once. Twice. Then he started the car. Jordan made the call from Dolores's kitchen on Wednesday morning, 4 days before Brenda's deadline expired. He used the main office number, the one listed on Ashworth Group's public business page. A receptionist answered on the second ring, professional and bright. Jordan gave his name as James Reed and said he was a former colleague of Camille Ashworth's at her previous firm. He said he had information that was material to a significant pending business matter, and that Mr. Ashworth would want to hear it in person rather than over the phone. There was a pause. Then, hold music. Philip picked up himself. That told Jordan something. Mr. Reed. The voice was smooth and measured. The voice of a man who had been in rooms where deals were made and who had learned, somewhere along the way, that appearing unimpressed was its own form of power. I understand you have something for me. I do, Jordan said. What firm did you say you were with? I didn't. Jordan kept his voice easy. This is a personal matter, not a professional one. I'll explain when we meet. Another pause, slightly longer this time. Jordan could almost feel Philip deciding, the quick internal calculation between curiosity and caution. Curiosity won, the way it usually did with men who believed they were too smart to be surprised. My home office, Philip said. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll send you the address. That works, Jordan said. The Ashworth house was in Myers Park, a wide, quiet street lined with old hardwoods and houses set back from the road behind manicured hedges. The house itself was traditional, brick and white trim, the kind of house that said established rather than new. A black SUV sat in the driveway. No other car. Camille was not home. Jordan had confirmed that through Victor the night before. She had a standing Thursday morning appointment, a Pilates class, followed by a standing lunch in South Park. She would not be back before 1. Jordan parked at the curb. He sat for a moment, hands loose in his lap, and looked at the house. Then he picked up his folder and got out. Philip answered the door himself. He was exactly what Victor's background report had prepared Jordan to expect. Tall, well-built, probably 50, with the kind of careful grooming that signals a man who considers his appearance a professional investment. He looked at Jordan with polite, practiced appraisal. The look of a man trying to categorize someone he had already decided was beneath him. Mr. Reed, he said, extending a hand. Jordan shook it. Thank you for seeing me. The home office was at the back of the house. A large, well-appointed room with built-in bookshelves, a mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs facing it. A room designed to make visitors feel like they were being granted an audience. Philip moved behind the desk immediately and sat. He gestured toward the chairs with the easy authority of a man who had always controlled his own furniture. Jordan sat. So, Philip said, leaning back, one hand resting on the edge of the desk, you worked with Camille at Hartwell. I did, Jordan said. And this information, is this something that should involve my attorney? That's your call, Jordan said pleasantly. I'm just here to make sure you have the full picture before certain filings go into record. Philip smiled thinly. All right. What's the picture? Jordan let him talk first. He asked about Ashworth Group. Open questions, the kind that gave Philip room to expand. How long had the firm been operating? The municipal contract. Was that the largest project currently in the pipeline? Philip answered with the comfortable confidence of a man who enjoyed talking about what he had built. And Jordan listened without interrupting, and the room felt entirely like Philip's room, which was exactly what Jordan needed it to feel like for a few minutes longer. Then Jordan opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the desk, spread slightly so each one was distinct. He did not explain them. He just let them sit there. Philip leaned forward. He read slowly. Jordan watched him. He watched the way Philip's hand went still on the desk surface. He watched the small shift in Philip's jaw when he reached the civil filing figure, $510,000. He watched the careful blankness that moved across Philip's face like a curtain being drawn, the expression of a man who is processing something he does not want to be seen processing. The room was very quiet. When Philip looked up, Jordan asked his one question. How much did she tell you? Philip was quiet for 3 full seconds. That was enough. She mentioned that her first husband had gotten into some kind of trouble at work, he said. His voice was steady, but it was the steadiness of effort. She said it had been painful, and that she didn't like to talk about it. Did she tell you his name? A beat. No. Did you ask? Philip's jaw tightened slightly. We all have a past, Mr. Reed. Jordan nodded once, unhurried. You put her name on 3 financing applications, he said, and on the preliminary filing for the municipal contract. She's my wife. She's also the subject of a formal investigation that will be initiated within 5 business days, Jordan said. His voice was the same as it had been since he sat down, even informational, without heat. When that filing goes into the state bar and the original prosecuting attorney's office, the Contract Review Board will conduct a background examination of every named party on your paperwork. He let that land. That's their standard process. That's not something I'm doing. That's just what happens. Philip looked at the 3 documents still on his desk. He did not say anything. I wanted you to have the full picture, Jordan said, before it became public record. He stood. He buttoned his jacket, 1 button, the way he always had before leaving a meeting. He picked up his empty folder. Thank you for your time, he said. He walked out of the room, through the hallway, and out the front door. He did not look back. Behind him, in the home office of his own house, Philip Ashworth sat alone with 3 documents on the mahogany desk in front of him, and the particular silence of a man who had just understood something he could not understand. Her number was not saved in his phone. He recognized it anyway. A 704 area code, Charlotte. He had dialed it enough times from inside Haverford in the first year, before he finally stopped. The memory of that number lived in a part of him that was not about thinking. He let it ring twice before he answered. Jordan. Her voice was the same. That was the thing he had not fully prepared for. It was exactly the same. Warm and controlled, and calibrated in a way that used to feel like intimacy, and now felt like watching someone pick up a tool. Camille. I think we should talk. A brief pause. In person. All right, he said. There's a coffee shop on Commonwealth. Anchor and Ground. Tomorrow at 11. She agreed too quickly. That meant she had already decided where she was going to take the conversation. She just needed him in a room. He was counting on that. He arrived 20 minutes early with Dolores. She wore her good blue coat and her low heels, and she did not ask a single unnecessary question the entire drive over. She ordered a tea when they got inside, chose a table near the window 2 spots away from the one Jordan selected, opened the small paperback she had brought, and did not look up when the door opened. Jordan sat with his coffee and his hands loose on the table, and he waited. Camille walked in at 11:03. She was dressed carefully, not overdressed, but considered, the way she had always been considered in everything that mattered to her presentation. Her hair was neat. Her posture was precise. She looked, to anyone in the room who didn't know better, like a woman handling a difficult situation with grace. Jordan stood briefly as she approached, the way he had been raised to do. He sat back down as she settled into the chair across from him. She looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, something that might have been genuine once, in a different version of things. "You look well," she said. He said nothing. She set her bag on the table, folded her hands, and she began. She had been scared. That was the frame she built it on. Fear. The marriage had been struggling in ways he hadn't seen, she said, because he had always been so focused, so in his own world, and she had felt herself disappearing, and she had made choices from a place of panic that she never intended to go as far as they did. Her voice was soft and steady, and full of the right pauses in the right places. She talked about pain as though she had the patent on it. She talked about moving forward, and about both of them deserving peace, and about what a quiet resolution might look like before certain things became irreversible. She went on for a while. Jordan let her. He did not shift in his chair. He did not look away. He gave her every word its full space, the way you let a witness finish before the cross-examination begins. When she stopped, the silence sat between them for 3 full seconds. Then Jordan spoke. "You used my login on 41 separate transactions," he said. His voice was even. Not cold, just precise. "The earliest one was a Thursday. I was in a client meeting from 2 to 4. My own notes document that. The transaction timestamp is 2:47 p.m. She opened her mouth slightly. He continued. "I lost my license. I lost my credit. I went into Haverford with 34 teeth and came out with 32 because there's no dental care in there worth the name." He said it the same way he said everything else. No theater, just the ledger. "I spent the first year trying to understand what I'd done wrong. I spent the second year understanding what you'd done. I spent the third year memorizing every transaction date in my own records, so the truth wouldn't blur in my head before I had a chance to use it." Camille was very still. "I'm not here to negotiate," Jordan said. "The filings are prepared. They go in Monday. I'm here because I wanted you to hear what's coming from me, face to face. You're owed that. So am I." He let that settle. Then he said, "I spoke to your mother." The color left Camille's face in a single, visible moment, like a light switched off behind her skin. "I found her through Dolores," Jordan said. "She's still on Emery Street. I sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. All of it. I didn't ask her to do anything." He paused. "I just thought she deserved to know the truth about what happened to the man her daughter married." Camille's composure, that perfect, professional, nearly flawless composure, cracked cleanly down the middle. Her lips parted. Her eyes went bright and wet and lost their shape. "Jordan!" He stood. He buttoned his jacket. One button, the same as always. "The filings go in Monday," he said. He walked to the door without looking back. 2 tables away, Dolores closed her paperback. She stood slowly, smoothed the front of her blue coat, and picked up her bag. She turned toward Camille's table. She looked at her, directly, fully, without hurry, the look of a woman who had been waiting 3 years to deliver it. Then she turned away and walked out into the October morning behind her nephew. The attorney's name was Marcus Webb. He was 41, sharp-eyed, and the kind of man who had spent his career catching things that other people missed. He worked with a wrongful conviction legal aid organization out of Greensboro, and he had reviewed Jordan's materials twice before their first meeting. Once quickly, once very slowly. After the second read, he had called Jordan and said, "This is one of the cleaner cases I've seen." That's not a compliment to anyone involved. Dolores had contributed $4,000 from an account she had been quietly adding to for 3 years. She did not mention this until Marcus asked about funding. Jordan had looked at her across the kitchen table when she said it, and could not find a single word adequate to the moment. He did not try to find one. He just nodded. She understood. Monday morning arrived gray and cool, the sky the color of old concrete. Jordan sat in a straight-backed chair beside Marcus, in the law office on Trade Street, his hands resting in his lap, while Marcus submitted the formal filings, State Bar, and the original prosecuting attorney's office, electronically and by certified mail simultaneously. It was a matter of keystrokes and printer sounds and the low hum of office equipment doing work that would take months to fully detonate. Jordan watched the confirmation numbers populate on Marcus's screen. He felt nothing theatrical, just the particular quiet of a thing that has been set in motion and cannot be stopped. The consequences did not arrive like thunder. They arrived the way compound interest arrives, quietly, methodically, and then all at once. Brenda Holloway's written statement triggered a State Bar ethics review within 11 days of submission. The ethics review generated a formal referral to the original prosecuting attorney's office for post-conviction examination. That referral required investigators to re-examine every document in the original case that bore Jordan's name, his credentials, his seal. They looked. For the first time, with genuine motivation, they looked. The forensic analysis of Jordan's personal ledger against the prosecution's transaction timestamps was submitted as supporting evidence. 41 transactions, 41 timestamp windows. 17 of them placed Jordan's credentials in active use during periods when his own contemporaneous records, handwritten, dated, corroborated by external meeting notes and client correspondence, showed him logged out in client meetings or physically off-site. 17 was enough. 17 was more than enough. The State Bar review expanded. The prosecuting attorney's office opened a formal post-conviction inquiry. Marcus filed a motion for reconsideration of Jordan's conviction on the basis of newly available forensic evidence and the suppression of material testimony. Brenda's memo withheld. At Ashworth Group, the silence started first. The municipal contract approval process, now aware of the active state inquiry through public record filings, initiated a mandatory background review of all named parties on the preliminary paperwork. Camille Ashworth's name was on 3 financing applications and the contract filing itself. Her background was now material. The review could not proceed while her background remained under active investigation. The contract was placed on administrative hold. 2 of Philip's primary investors received the news within a week of each other. They withdrew. Not loudly. Men like that never did anything loudly. They simply stopped returning calls, and then their attorneys sent letters, and then the commitments were gone. The financing line Philip had secured against his commercial properties was called in ahead of schedule by the lending institution. They had read the same public records. They had done their own math. Ashworth Group contracted, visibly, irreversibly, the kind of contraction that a certain class of people noticed immediately. Because in Philip Ashworth's world, reputation was the load-bearing wall of everything he had built. Pull it, and the structure did not fall all at once. It simply became a building that was no longer safe to be inside. Philip managed his marriage through attorneys after the 4th week. He did not divorce Camille. He was advised against it, for reasons related to the financial investigations, and he understood the advice, and he followed it. And he sat inside the consequences of his own deliberate incuriosity without anyone to blame but the man in the mirror. Camille was formally interviewed by state investigators 9 weeks after the filing. She retained a defense attorney before the interview. The interview did not go well for her. She was charged on a Tuesday morning, served at the house on Alderman Drive through a process server. 2 counts of felony embezzlement, 1 count of identity fraud, 1 count of obstruction. The charges arrived in a sealed envelope, quiet and precise, the way the truth tends to arrive when it has been patient enough. 2 counts of felony embezzlement, nearly identical to the charges Jordan had pled to 3 years and 4 months earlier. She had used his name so completely, so carefully, so thoroughly across nearly 2 years of documentation that when investigators reconstructed the behavioral profile of the actual perpetrator, the access times, the chosen accounts, the communication patterns surrounding each transaction, the profile fit Camille Reeves's work history and access schedule with a specificity her own attorneys could not explain away. She had built the crime in his name. His name had come home. 7 months after the filings, Jordan sat in a courtroom in Charlotte, in a dark suit Marcus had helped him select. The judge read the order. Conviction vacated. Dolores, in the second row, made a sound Jordan had never heard her make before. Quiet and broken and full of 3 years of held breath releasing all at once. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook. Jordan sat very still. He did not cry. He nodded once, a small, precise nod. The kind of nod a man makes when he has been told something he already knew. And the knowing of it is both a relief and an ache too deep for any other expression. 18 months after that, Jordan Reeves received a letter confirming the reinstatement of his certified public accounting license in the state of North Carolina. He read it once at the kitchen table of his apartment in Raleigh. He set it down. He made coffee. He drank it standing at the window, looking out at the city, and thought about nothing in particular for a long time. He had taken a position at a respected forensic accounting firm downtown, the kind of work that suited his specific mind, finding in other people's numbers the discrepancies that told the real story underneath. He was good at it. He had always been good at it. On Sundays, he cooked. Real meals, the kind that took time and filled the apartment with something warm. Dolores visited monthly, taking the bus up from Charlotte, arriving with something she had baked and opinions she had saved up, and they ate together at his table and talked about nothing urgent and everything that mattered. Camille's case moved through the courts slowly and without mercy, the way those cases did. On a Tuesday evening in October, 18 months after his license was reinstated, Jordan sat at his desk with a client's quarterly records open on his screen. He found it in the third column. A small discrepancy, $1,100, routed through a sub-account that didn't match the client's documented authorization pattern. Small. He flagged it. He documented it. Timestamp, account number, the precise nature of the irregularity, cross-referenced against the client's authorization records. He opened a separate internal memo, wrote it up cleanly, and attached the supporting records. He saved the file. Then he closed his laptop, pushed back from the desk, and walked to the window. The Raleigh skyline sat out there in the dark, lit and quiet and indifferent, the way cities always were. He looked at it for a moment. He breathed in. He was Jordan Reeves. He kept records. He knew what things were worth. And he had never, not once, miscounted. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.